Good morning.
Good morning, Tammy. Good morning, Zahra.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hello, Narsima. Hello, Karthik.
Hello.
I did invite Shang Wei to join. I haven't heard back from him, so he may or may not.
Yeah, okay. I think we're supposed to send these out on the general respect channel. And then Shangwei would get them before.
Oh, okay. Um, that
It's
ends
just
up being like 2 meetings a week. I don't know if they'll really want to do that. If we have specific topics that we are announcing for the discussion, then they can decide whether they want to join.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll make sure that I do
We
that.
agreed to inform people, but didn't demand that they come. They just wanted to know.
Yeah. But because we didn't really have any agenda items, I didn't do it, but I will do it next time.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if Christina and Shangwei will join, so we can go ahead. Yeah, I had originally wanted to maybe talk about where we're headed, what we think we want to contribute, even just in terms of products, not necessarily how we're going to integrate for the deliverable for NSF, the written report and the video. But Tammy wants to add some structure and think about it first. So let's do that first before we discuss it more formally. But maybe you can just update each other again, and if anybody has any questions. I am curious, I think in the last meeting or a couple of meetings ago, someone mentioned, Rayeedul or Tammy, that you had some ideas for how you wanted to implement ABM, or certain aspects of it. I was curious. But anything, maybe if you want to update. Let's go in reverse order this time, since I keep doing it with myself and Tammy.
So I think we're gonna Rayeedul and I are maybe gonna present this on Friday.
Okay.
Did you want to do it again? But I think we've ended up with model questions or data questions, like on how do we integrate? And so maybe, Rayeedul, you can bring forward some of the questions that you've had there too.
Yeah, this would be the right forum for that. If you have questions, especially on data, that's what we should discuss. The weeds.
Yeah,
So,
and there were some things in the notes from last week that might need modeling meetings. So I don't know when those can get on the agenda, but just bringing that back to your attention.
So I should look at the group meeting notes to see what topics we might want to bring in here. Okay, I'll make a note
Yeah,
of
but
that.
it's nothing different than what's in the email I sent to you.
I see. Okay, got it. Okay. So Zahra, do you want to start?
Considering what I provided for update last week, there are some details about building object that I want first to discuss with Tammy, and so there is no specific update for the modeling tip.
Okay. Did you say there were some discrepancies at some point, Tammy, between the results you got and ResTalk or something?
Yes, I found what's the reasons for some of this discrepancy, like the data set they released for 2022 is based on the actual weather data, but their analysis tool, the simulation tool, is based on the typical, which is the one that I use. So there is a discrepancy for the weather data, and they use different balance point for temperature. I used like 65, they used 55, and there is some details like this that I found, and I want to correct them and discuss the results with Tammy today.
Okay. I think though, yeah, the details between you and me, I think the big picture though is that you are at a point to provide heating energy per square foot. We might have to still work on discrepancies, but this could go into the operating cost. I think a question that we have had is maybe two questions. One is, what do we do with the variability? So you produce like all homes that or all of Restock simulated homes within a location that match certain characteristics, like the age, and then energy per square meter per square foot of floor area. And there will be some variability in that. What do we do with that? Do we provide it to Rayeedul? Do we just say, here's a distribution? Do we give him like the 3 or 4 options that get returned? And so what's useful for the, especially for Rayeedul, but maybe for the rest of the team. And then the other thing maybe to bring out is some of the decision rules. The reason we're doing this is we believe the decision rules are going to have that operating cost in them, right? Like that's a factor. Oh, and Christina just disappeared, but I wish she was here because what I want to know from her work is like, does your assumed operating cost, does that translate directly in to coefficients that she's getting?
I don't think we don't really have operating cost.
But you have fuel cost, right?
So we just spoke about this literally yesterday, because what she has had so far is just the individual components separately. So she's had fuel prices, she's had climate, HDD, heating degree days as separate variables. And I was suggesting that they aren't necessarily a linear combination, that we should use the resulting operating cost or the, as part of the payback analysis, not just the operating cost, the full payback analysis as one of the decision rule determinants. And so she's going to go back and combine essentially the fuel price and climate, which are multiplicative basically, rather than linear addition, and use that instead. So that would be equivalent to what you're calling the coefficient for the operating cost. Is that something that you should want to use? That's basically to what extent the payback of a particular heating fuel or heating technology explains the adoption of a heat pump. That's what that coefficient will represent. In other words, it's a good way for us to test the idea that everything is about payback. That would carry all the weight of the explanation of the heat pump adoption if it were purely an economic decision. And we'll obviously, her work shows that it isn't just that.
Well, and I think Rayeedul is then also going to address that. But I think you need the operating cost. It's just not fully dominant, right?
Right, yeah. I don't think we need it's hard to relate the Restock buildings to the respondents in AHS, that's what we would have to do if we wanted to use Zahra's operating cost. in our model. This is a statistical model, so ideally you'd use everything that's native to the survey. So yeah, I don't think, but it makes a lot of sense. I don't think it can be useful for the statistical analysis that Christina is doing. And vice versa, I think, her operating cost is based on very little information about the homes. You have much more detail with Restock. I see the flow between Zahra and Rayeedul as being really important, as you already know. The question there to me is what level of heterogeneity Rayeedul is going to use in the ABM, and
Mhm.
then aggregate
what-
accordingly.
And what level we need to put in. So I'd like to, or with Rayeedul and Zahra, but may have others contribute. This could be a modeling meeting or it could be a group meeting. Go back to the murals board and
Yeah.
have this like who's giving what and where does it go. And then I
Yeah.
think we have an element that we need from Zahra, but when you get into the details, it's always like, oh, we need something else, or she needs another input.
Mhm. Yeah. But this is a good place to discuss that if you think there's something that you need from Karthik's data, for example, or Christina's. So, we just discussed Christina's. Karthik's data also for operating costs, I don't really see that. Karthik's data is similar to Christina's data. It's both AHS kind of data, with other few variables. So I don't
Yeah,
see.
we don't have operating costs, in any of those surveys.
No, that's why we're getting it from Zahra, right? Because it's not trivial.
Yeah. But you were asking about variability, what level of variability to represent? It seems to me, depending upon the granularity of the home archetypes that Rayeedul models, whatever range of operating cost you get for buildings that fall within that group would be the variability you want to include, right? Because you'll have a whole number of building types or buildings in the sample that Zahra will calculate for. And they are all being collapsed into a group in
Mhm.
Rayeedul's model. And so you'd want to capture the range of operating costs within that group. I see that as one way to represent the uncertainty in the operating cost for Rayeedul's archetype
Mhm.
home.
Yeah, like he could just sample from that.
Exactly.
Either take one of those instances or use it to generate a probability distribution.
Exactly. Yeah. Or just summary statistics, standard error and mean kind of thing.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe another question to bring forward about Restock right now. By the way, Narsum, I don't know if I mentioned when I went down to NREL that I saw Eric Wilson like running by,
Yeah,
but I
you told
never
me.
spoke to him. And like he didn't talk about what he was doing. It's a really weird meeting because it could be really good forum for analysis, but it's not conducted that way. Anyway, since we are drawing on Restock so much, we should probably tell them that we're doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean, I know
Yeah.
they make it public, etc., but if we anyway, I didn't know what you thought would be the best way since you know him.
Yeah.
I know Anne pestered them a lot when she was trying to figure stuff out. She did more than I thought she should actually, but
Yeah.
like she would ask me questions and I'm like, oh God, you didn't send that to them, did you? But she was, new and figuring it out. But since that time, we have not connected with them. And so I just want to put a pin in that since you know him, you might want to, I can shoot him an email and copy you and, name drop you or just, I feel like we should connect with them and inform them the kind of thing that we're doing.
So the them that you mean, Eric is on special envoy, whatever you call it, special mission to the DOE, working for Carolyn Snyder. I don't know if he's back. The fact that he was at your meeting might not mean he's back. It may just mean he
I know
came back.
I was surprised to see him there.
Yeah, I don't know if he's back. It's possible that he's back. I'm guessing not, because when I saw him in June, he was there for at least a year. He's developing a decarbonization strategy for buildings for the DOE.
Mhm.
But then there's a ResTalk team who I met with at the IEW who are perhaps the ones you need to interface with
Okay,
in what you're talking about. So I think those are the people that you should be informing,
okay,
not Eric directly. And
Not
apologies, I
Eric,
don't
okay.
remember who that point person should be because I met a couple of people and I don't know who the point person there is. But maybe the website lists a point
Yeah.
person. Like, does the ResTalk list a point person? If it does, that would be the person I think to mention. There's two. Unless we're trying to alert DOE to what we're doing or something, I think it's a little premature for that.
Okay. But I do think we should not publish a paper and have them be surprised.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Okay. So that's Zahra and ResTalk. Anything else there?
I want just to say that the data set is different from their analysis tools. Without the original build stack sample, we couldn't reproduce the results. So for the newest version, they haven't yet released that build stack. At this point, I decided to use only version 2022 rather 2024. Last session, Rayeedul asked about which version I would choose.
Zara, what is the word you're using? Build stock?
Build a stack, yes. It's a file. They release the whole housing sample that they use for their analysis, their outputs.
Okay, and what is it that is there and what is not there? I don't think we're familiar with the terminology you're using.
In fact, ResTalk do a sampling from a collection of the housing characteristics. Like you decide, I want, for instance, 30 building. They use sampling and create a file of this housing representative of the building stacks, like building units.
Mm-hmm.
File of the building units, and they do the simulation on Energy Plus then, and create data sets for outputs like emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, the electricity, heating, propane, and other outputs they want.
Okay, so can you answer the question directly? What is there and what is not there? You said what they do, but I still don't have the understanding of.
The first part of the data sets, the inputs, the housing characteristic is in the build stack file.
Okay, and that is not released.
No, that's not released, but we could generate that by ourselves, but it's 2 million entries, so it's better to use theirs rather than produce ours.
So what is it that so you're saying they have not released the building characteristics of in the new data set of the 2 million buildings, is that right?
I mean, they haven't released the sample file, the sampled file.
Okay, what is in the sample file?
Exactly the characteristic of the buildings, but it's available in the data sets. It's like intermediate file to do simulation if you want to use it.
Okay, the intermediate, okay.
Yes.
So currently they've released a new data set this year. It's larger, but some of the data are missing and it's some of the data that we would want, so we're not yet using it.
Yes. Somehow you are correct, somehow not. Because the data set is complete, but we can't do any analysis on that without that intermediate file. We can't check the simulation by ourselves to see the results.
And can you specify what is in the intermediate file?
The sampling weights and the other information about the building units. That sampling weights and the schedule they used.
But we don't use the sampling weights.
Um,
We should do this separately and then bring it back to the group.
yes, I want to discuss that.
Okay. Short
In
answer,
any-
we're not using the new one yet.
In any case, I would use 2022 over 2024, regardless of all of these mechanical things, because it's more consistent with, you don't want to use the latest stuff. There's always potential problems with it. You want to use just one version before. That's been a little bit more established.
That's totally fair. But at the same time, I've been in positions where I start my analysis with something and I know there's new stuff and then the reviewers complain because you didn't use the latest one. So we always have to pay attention to where we are.
Yeah, but today, 2022 sounds pretty recent.
Yeah, it
overall.
does. Okay.
Okay. Rayeedul, do you want to jump in? Again, I'm just curious as to what you think, how your thinking is advanced
Sure.
on
Yeah.
decision rules or agents or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tammy and I were Tammy, can you enable me for screen
Oh,
share?
I'm sorry. Just, yeah, I
Fine.
can.
So we were planning to give a full presentation on Friday to receive feedback from the team, but I was hoping to give you an update and receive your first comment about how does what is your feedback about the rules we are trying to formulate into our ABM model. So I may not be super efficient in explaining without those presentation slides, but let me try to explain. So we have two-stage or three-stage decision-making process. The first one is triggered by Tammy's equipment age distribution. And once those families get into those families eligible for making changes in their heating system will get into the ABM model decision making process, and they have 5 different heating options. And for each of those heating options, they will look for the cost associated with each of them. And it's very pretty straightforward how we calculate the cost. We are considering installation cost and annual cost associated with each of them. And this is very simple equation widely used to do that calculation. But
Can I stop you for a minute? Because, I just realized that nobody has seen these 5 choices. And we
Okay.
just randomly picked them based on like, oh, these are probably prevalent. So I just wanted to say 2 things. First, these can change.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I would like feedback. There's a large number of options in Kartik's data set.
Yeah.
So there's heating system type, and then there's fuel. And so those actually create a very large number of options. And I chose 5 to represent like most of the options. So if other people think that it would be useful to have different options, then we can talk about that.
So yeah, thanks for the comment, Tammy. So that's
Can you
basically
move that spreadsheet so that
no,
just move it on your screen so people can see? No, just the 5 options that we chose.
okay, yeah.
So people could be thinking about that.
Yeah. So that's what basically, Tammy, I wanted to discuss with you today. So I was, when I was getting into the situation data and try to extract those heating options into the ABM model, it gives me 24 different heating systems. So we need to make a decision what are some of the options we'll be looking at to do the cost calculation. So basically that Excel file is basically those 24 options that I have extracted from the SS Fusion data. So, but okay, getting back to the decisions. So the first hypothesis we are trying to focus on, so those installation costs is a large amount of money. and people from different socioeconomic status will perceive it differently. And the literature suggests a specific function like dynamic consumer discount rate. People with different economic status will perceive those large amount of money differently. Higher income people will see it a very trivial amount of money, whereas lower income people will see a large investment from their part to do those changes in their household. So that's the first thing we are trying to infuse into our ABM model, coming up with those variation in perception related to this upfront cost and annual cost. And based on that, we will do cost metrics for this different technological option. The second one is that the current literature is most kind of static. Based on this cost analysis, whichever is the least amount, people will choose that as their option to be installed at their households. But we are trying to make it more dynamic or realistic. The idea is that, let's say, for example, you are given a choice that this will cost you $10,000 to make changes at your household, and this one will cost you $15,000. And people with different socioeconomic status have a tendency to see these two options similar to them or different to them. Higher income people will say that whatever it is 10K or 15K, it is same to me. But lower income people, to them, maybe 15K, this 5K safety buffer zone is kind of like big investment. They will see it two different options. If they are presented with a 10K option or 11K option, they may see as a like one option. So there is an economy theory like risk affinity, constant risk aversion utility function, which give us an estimate of that safety buffer zone, how people perceive how much likely they can go higher, something like that. So based on these two rules, we will the ABM will select not the least cost heating system option, but the most realistic representation of people's decision-making choice depending on their economic status in the context of heating system.
Right, well, just to confirm, so are you just applying a different discount rate for the different groups
Yes.
to reflect that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not quite that, is it? Because I think the it's not, so you can apply a discount rate and then pick the lowest cost one. But I think hold on, I'm not really sure how the math works yet, but I think the point is that depending on your income level, there might be options that look more or less the same.
That's the second stage.
And so our initial, or Rayeedul's initial decision model was just pick the lowest cost, but then this allows you to be like, well, some people will think $12,000 or $14,000 is the same.
Yeah, that's the
You don't have a preference for the 12 or the 14. Other preferences kick in.
yeah. Tammy, you're talking about the rule number 2.
Oh, maybe I'm sorry. I'm mixing everything up. Okay, maybe I'll let you explain this.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Narso, I think if I understand correctly, you were asking about the first rule that.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at that CDR, the consumer discount rate. But you weren't talking about rule 1 when you were describing the phenomenon of risk aversion and whether people are seeing 10,000 as the same as 11,000. That's what Tammy is talking about, right?
Yeah.
But I guess before, I just wanted to clarify, are you using different discount rates for different income groups
Yes.
in rule 1?
Yes.
You will. So you will be having.
Do we know what they are? is the
Uh,
different question.
Well, there is literature on that. Generally, you have higher discount rates for poorer people.
So
Sure, but what are
But
they?
it's very,
And
very,
how much do they
who knows?
differ?
Oh my
So-
God. Yeah, it's
this is a very old paper, Narsima. So basically, they were the first one to propose this dynamic consumer discount rate.
mhm.
They did it for a like cooking fuel source type, and
Yeah.
so they proposed the idea first that for different income level, you'll be able to calculate different dynamic consumer discount rate. So I'm just
Yeah.
waiting
I know
to
this paper, yeah. But it's not dynamic, meaning is it dynamic in the sense of changing over time? Or
no
is it just different by income group?
income group, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's fine. Okay. So,
I mean, if you have investment opportunities, then doesn't it become pegged to the market, market interest rates or? Like, I don't know that it would be if you don't have investment opportunities or flexibility, but
I mean, this is supposed to represent a private preference for future savings over present savings or future costs over present costs. It's not reflecting market conditions really. It's reflecting your own ability to absorb upfront costs or defray. Yeah. So when you think about market discount rates, those are driven by interest rates and things like that more broadly.
yeah, but I guess I make capital decisions of this magnitude, like buying a heat pump or buying a car. Once you can afford to pay for it up front, then I think it becomes tagged to the market. I don't know.
I'm not sure what you mean. I mean,
Yeah, let's not go into those weeds. Okay.
but anyway, so okay, you apply a discount rate, but this is your rule 2 is interesting because you're not just simply picking the lowest cost option. Some options may look similar to each other because certain income groups don't differentiate between cost differences if they are within a certain range. So
Yeah.
I like that principle, and you have support for that principle, I assume, in this theory. So then what will they do instead if they have equivalent options?
So the literature suggests, and it's not widely used, this function. I haven't seen application of this risk aversion utility function in energy context, but my hypothesis is if two options are similar to them, they will choose the most efficient option.
Energy efficient, you mean? Is that right? Or?
Energy efficient, yeah.
Why is that? Because that's already taken into account in the cost.
Yeah, or in the operating costs.
So it's kind of like the psychological perspective that higher income people have a tendency with going with like expensive but energy efficient option if they can take that risk.
That's one way to interpret what you just said is a lower discount rate, that you're willing to pay more upfront and buy a much more efficient product because since you don't have cash constraints, you can value, higher operating cost benefits. So you want to pick the best, most efficient technology, even though it's really expensive.
I think, Rayeedul, you might be referring to though some value beyond the operating cost. That even if they cost, are you referring to the fact that even if they cost the same, people perceive energy efficiency or other environmental factors to be a virtue, and so they're selecting based on that virtue if everything looks the same to everything, if the cost looks the same to them?
That's the ideal situation, like taking into consideration what are some of the factors that affect people's psychological perception. But as I have the only data in the context of economic cost, so that's how I'm perceiving it, that And it's just not operating cost, but total installation cost plus operating cost. People will make a judgment that I can avail this.
Well, so if there is a non-cost value of efficiency, like a status thing or something, I have not seen that in the literature. If you are thinking of something, it'll be good to circulate the papers you're talking about. It's interesting, that there's value
Is
people
there
are
not
seeing.
that in some of the other adoption literature? Like there's typically environmental attitudes, but I don't know that people have been able to separate them from the cost, right? But people have looked at,
Yeah, people have looked at environmental attitudes for sure as distinct from cost. And those, I don't see in that literature. Well, I haven't looked at totally thoroughly on the environmental attitude literature, but on the adoption literature, which I have been looking at, environmental attitudes usually is about conservation or climate, energy efficiency is not necessarily how it's presented to people, It could be because you could choose energy efficiency because it reduces CO2 emissions. So I totally see that what you're saying is plausible. No doubt about that. I just haven't seen it literally. I haven't seen evidence for it literally.
so Rayeedul, is that what you were saying though, that this separate consideration is not a cost consideration, it's a value-based consideration, whether or not we have evidence for it at this time? Is that what you meant? Or did you mean something else and I misinterpreted you?
No, I think I am understanding what Narasimhan you're trying to say, but in my mind, in the current methodology, I'm just thinking from a cost perspective.
Okay, then I
And-
misinterpreted what you were saying. And I
But-
agree with Narasimha that it's already in the cost if we calculate it that way. So then that would be double counting.
But in the cost we have, okay, yeah. The idea is that we have that cost matrix that we calculate, but usually what happens is that people choose the least one. And the idea is that we are trying to create how much an individual can take economic risk based on their economic status. What is their economic power to avail that?
Okay.
So I know that's what you were trying to say. And what I had said initially was that sounds like one way to interpret that is a different discount rate, because you have the same cost, the same operating cost, the same upfront cost, but you come up with a different answer because you have a different discount rate, which is lower. You have a lot of money up front and you're taking into account the value of energy efficiency by counting savings, operating savings more than another person who sees exactly the same costs, but comes up with a different net present value because they have a higher discount rate. So, but that may not be what you mean. I'm just saying that's one way to interpret what you're saying.
Yeah, I understand your point. Yeah.
Anyway, think about it. See if this is a good way to represent what you're saying or not. I just wanted to just give you something to think about more broadly, and maybe I need to send you the state of my review paper right now because I have finished the portion that covers what we understand to be the drivers. Because as you're developing these rules, right, and you're going beyond the life cycle cost, which is kind of like a rational economic choice, you have to think about why you're including new rules, because you have a choice of many. There's many different things that can come to bear. We don't actually know in Colorado what actually should be included unless we base it on Chris's work. So you can pick something, you can pick this, what you're picking in terms of constant risk aversion stuff. But I think you do have to ask yourself, what's your rationale for expanding this, in the context of the project? Like, why are you doing it? If you have a choice of multiple enhancements to the life cycle cost, why are you picking what you pick? Are you trying to test something new? Are you trying to draw from the results of my review or Chris's fieldwork? or something else, right? I think there should be a rationale
Mhm.
for what you include, just that
Mhm.
it would then reflect also how it fits into the project. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe, another option is from Ellison's review, if you're thinking about adaptive comfort and you use different set points for different household groups, maybe, and you come up with different life cycle calculations because they have all the same numbers, but they use a different set point, you
Mhm.
know, and you still get a different answer. So, yeah, it's something to think about. I like your this buffer business in terms of risk aversion. I like that. It's really it makes a lot of sense. But I'm assuming you'll do something more than that
Mhm.
in terms of the decision rule. So I'll send you the state of my review, just draft.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's it, what you wanted to share. So are you thinking of any kind of interaction effect or anything like that? That would, because again, the traditional ABMs usually have something to
Yeah.
coordinate.
Yeah. So certainly
Well,
the ABM can do, yeah.
think, Narasimha, that this was not like random. It's not like we're just adding things. That I think the issue is that if from observation, so first of all, we know that people are not always choosing the least cost because otherwise we would only see one thing out in the field, right?
Yeah.
And so that there must be some indifference, and I think this is that what Rayeedul is proposing is an attempt to make a space for that in the model. And the factors that guide within indifference, I think, are maybe open to adjustment. This is just a theory-based way of representing how indifference appears in a model. Because otherwise the least cost was just always gonna, run to one technology. And so, yes, we want to take, I think what's being presented here is really, let's set the model up in this way, and we expect it to be nudged based on information from your review and from Chris's work. But we have to have a place for those things in the model. So this is less like, here is how the ABM will work, and more, here is a structure that things can be plugged into.
I'm not seeing the structural aspect of it. This sounds like a very specific additional rule you're putting in about how you consider upfront cost, right? Which is totally legitimate. And then if you see indifference, then what do? You still need something.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
specific rule to represent indifference, but then that opens up the space of choice within
Yeah.
technologies where these things can be applied.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just, it doesn't have to be well formulated. It's just a question of where are we going with this down the road. And by the way, there's a lot of different ways to avoid the winner takes all thing. Usually it applies more at a market scale because all of a sudden the entire market goes to buying a heat pump the next year, which doesn't make sense. And so they have all sorts of parameters to kind of constrain the model from picking up the more cheapest technology. But when it's an individual household and they're making an individual choice, there's no such thing about winner takes all. It's like they're making a decision. Are they going to pick the cheapest one or something else? So, and it's fair to not pick the cheapest one. So for example, one of the findings from my review is reliability, comes up as an important factor. So is there a different perception of reliability from a heat pump versus a gas furnace? And if so, that could be another kind of preference that's put in to bias towards one of them, and there's other factors too. So yeah.
Yeah, so getting back to Narsma's question, capturing peer interaction, we can certainly do that, but for now, we are just focusing from the cost perspective. Tammy and I discussed about that at a length, and maybe that would be a future extension. But for the time being, as Tammy was saying, that we want to lay out the first foundation, then we can think about, okay, this is the modules we want to plug into, something like that.
That's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
That's perfectly reasonable. I'm just thinking by June we should have an idea for what direction we want to go with the, with the model beyond that, because this is state of the art in terms of using cost, right? So I don't know. We want to show that we're thinking beyond that, even if we haven't implemented anything. That's fine.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Anything else, Raido? Or should we stop with that?
Yeah. Thank you for your
Thanks.
feedback.
That sounds really good. That's sounds really looks really good. Karthik, Christina, any updates you want to provide? Well, Christina presented last week. Karthik, maybe I'll start
Yeah,
with you since we have.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I signed up for the big group meeting on the 26th. So that's sort of my target
Okay.
to have my story in some form by then. So I wanted to also ask if we could have the 16th Tuesday meeting to sort of brainstorm or have some of my initial results so that I can, be in a better shape for the 26th. So at least part of the 16th meeting, I'd like to use for, discussing my results.
This is for
Another
the
sort of
basic
long-term
needs
question.
versus subjective well-being, right? Okay, yeah.
Correct. And then maybe for long term or for, for the presentation, I want to think about how, if you wanted to have like a GitHub page or something for the project where, I could make everything public, maybe along with Ryan's stuff. And I'll leave it to maybe Tammy or you, Narasimha, to decide how we want to sort of present all of that. But just want to put it out there so that I can start building stuff as well as we get ready for the deadline. So
I see. You mean make the project data available so that, if some nerd in the office, in program office wants to look at it, they can do that.
right. I think just more of a show off thing saying that, hey, we have all of this, we've made it public, you can
Right,
click
right.
here and all of that stuff. So something to think about, because I know Ryan has a GitHub page for what he's doing. I don't know if you want to like integrate both of them and have one project GitHub, or if you want to do it separately, and up to you. So
That's actually an important point. I mean, that could apply to Zahra's work as well. I mean, even if we don't actually do it, we can just have a nugget to share that that's where we're heading.
mhm.
I didn't think of that. I think that's a useful thing.
Yeah, so I think it's a great point. And I think, Zahra, certainly with your building object, ResDoc made all of their data public, and just the principle of being able to extract this information, I think, is worth sharing publicly. That's how I've thought about it. Maybe I didn't share that with you. Kartik, I think that, so for coming up to your presentation, I've got maybe a couple of specific questions that we won't address today, but maybe you can be thinking of. One is that we didn't ever dive into the heat maps, and we didn't see a lot of correlations, but I think we should address what kind of correlations, if any, should be addressed in Rayeedul's model. And then the other question, which could, I don't know if it'll really motivate your well-being paper, but I think it would be a way to force us to integrate. And so if there is one thing about how well or anything that you found in your massive data analysis that would be useful to represent in an ABM, that is like out of the box, like this kind of security affects this other kind of security or is correlated with this other kind of security. Pick one thing that we might want to contemplate including. Because I think that creates a bridge where we're forced to use the power of the data or attempt to use and fight through the arguments against doing it, right? And satisfy ourselves with regard to causality or statistics or whatever. Just pick one thing that people might want to include in an ABM, and that'll start the conversation.
Yep, noted. Yeah, I think there might be something along racial lines, but well, I'll get back to you on that on the 16th, hopefully, with some concrete ideas. But yeah, I think there is something already that I'm thinking about. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my update or plan.
Okay, I think we should stop 10:50, rather than anybody else, because then we'll get late. Thanks very much. I've noted the 16th, Karthik, for you to have a initial discussion. And April 9th, next week, anybody want to talk about anything specific that I should put on the agenda, or shall I just think about it and then we can do a similar status update? I don't expect to have anything specific. Or Tammy, if you get further on structure and want us to, I think at some point we should start talking about what aspects of our products we want to present individually as research output, as well as for the deep integration. So whenever
I
you
like
feel
that word.
Which one?
Jubilee.
Oh,
So one thing I'll offer, I feel like this is never urgent, but you're welcome to give me a day's notice or so and we can talk about it. You know, I've been kind of hung up on how to present rules, and I've been working on building that into the cohort model. And so I don't expect everybody to do this, but I think it would be nice to have a powwow where I can show you like this is how I present things, like all my inputs are in comma separated value files, and I hope they're transparent, but they're probably not as transparent as I think. And then we can talk about how that has analogs in what other people are doing, or what aspects of lack of transparency among ourselves could be improved.
okay.
So if you ever feel open and want me to do that, I'm happy to do it. I just need a little time to prepare.
Okay, noted. Good. Thank you, everyone. See you on Friday.